They said you were done, finished. A closed chapter in a book nobody wanted to read anymore. The one they stopped mentioning at gatherings. The name that became a whisper, then nothing at all. The energy they tried to suffocate with their fake sympathy and their rehearsed concern. You know what's wild? They're already panicking, already huddled in their group messages, already stalking your every move, already wondering if you're still broken, still defeated, still small enough to overlook. But something changed, didn't it? Something in your posture straightened, something in your energy got dangerous. Something in your quiet became so deafening it's making their souls hurt. And now they're shaking because they can sense what's building. They can feel the earthquake forming, the return brewing, the rebirth happening in places they can't see. They assumed they had more time. They believed you'd stay buried. They thought the ending was written, the narrative finished, the tombstone carved. But you didn't just crawl out of that grave. You dissected it. You studied the blueprint of your own destruction. You took notes on every face that mourned you while your heart was still beating. And now you're about to execute something so calculated, so inevitable, so surgically perfect that they won't just be surprised. They'll be permanently scarred. They'll be in counseling a decade from now, trying to process how someone they erased came back and erased everything they thought they knew. This isn't a simple return. This is judgment disguised as grace. This is warfare that doesn't need weapons. This is you becoming the ending they never anticipated. Let's examine what's actually unfolding here. What their equations can't solve, their theories can't explain, their arrogance can't comprehend. You weren't meant to survive this. By every metric they measured, you should have collapsed months ago. By every timeline they created, you should have come crawling back to their feet, desperate for their acceptance, confessing to sins you never committed. They had the whole thing mapped out. They constructed the trap, poisoned every well, burned every bridge, and sat back waiting for you to self-destruct. But you didn't. You observed them observing you. You sensed their attention, documenting your every crack, every vulnerability, every moment they assumed proved your permanent defeat. And you allowed them that delusion. You let them throw their premature victory party. That was your opening move, letting them celebrate while you were still in the game, letting them get drunk on their cruelty. Because while they were busy toasting to your downfall, you were busy reconstructing yourself into something their worst nightmares couldn't imagine, something their strategies can't counter, something their minds can't process. You weren't mending the way normal people mend. You weren't recovering according to any book they'd read. You were metamorphosing. You were evolving in the shadows, in the silence, in the territories they couldn't access. Every attack became ammunition. Every backstab became education. Every abandonment became confirmation that you were always destined to walk this road without them. And now their mathematics are failing. How are you still breathing? How are you still rational? How are you not consumed by resentment, not shattered, not on your knees? The formulas don't balance. The behavior doesn't align. The pattern they memorized doesn't apply. You became the error in their code, the exception that broke their system. Oh, you should witness them now, already constructing their defenses, already writing their revisionist history, already rehearsing their justifications. They're behind closed doors, drafting explanations for why your resurrection doesn't qualify, why it's illegitimate, why it's somehow unjust that you refused to stay destroyed. Pay attention to their words. They'll attribute it to chance. They'll say you had advantages. They'll claim the universe favored you, connections you didn't deserve, doors that opened without effort. They'll say everything except what's true, that you outworked them in the dark, that you outlasted them in agony, that you out-evolved them while they remained comfortable, complacent, and counterfeit. They require these lies because accepting reality would shatter their entire framework, accepting that you rose through pure willpower, through vision, through absolute refusal to let them write your ending. That's too devastating for their fragile identities to absorb. So they'll minimize it. They'll label it luck when it was war. They'll call it temporary when it's forever. They'll call it accident when it's the product of 10,000 invisible wars you fought in rooms they'll never see, in hours they'll never comprehend. And the most disturbing part, they're already repositioning themselves as casualties of your success. They're already rewriting the past, pretending they always had faith in you, pretending they were cheering from the sidelines, pretending your name didn't burn their throats 6 months earlier. They'll embrace you now, perform like they predicted this outcome, like they always recognized your capacity, but you remember. You remember the abandonment when you reached out. You remember the mockery when you shared your dreams. You remember the rejection, the unreturned messages, the assistance that never materialized. You remember every single expression that treated you like you were insane for believing in yourself when the world didn't. And now those identical expressions are preparing their speeches, their rationalizations, their carefully constructed alibis about why they weren't present then but want access now. Defense attorneys in the trial of their own conscience. And you're the evidence that can't be disputed. You're the witness they can't discredit. You're the judgment they can't overturn. Your existence is the final verdict. Your triumph is the punishment they'll endure silently, observing from the margins, knowing they gambled on the wrong outcome. And now, the game is finished. They'll attempt to diminish your win, but your presence alone is the most powerful rebuttal they'll ever encounter. No speech is necessary, just proof, just undeniable, unavoidable, unforgettable proof. Here's what makes this comeback criminal in their worldview. You didn't just rise again, you returned transformed, deadlier, more calculated, more driven, less merciful. You returned with a new framework they can't penetrate, new walls they can't scale, new requirements they can't satisfy. The previous you, that version that smiled through abuse, that accepted scraps, that apologized for breathing, annihilated, erased, cremated, and what emerged? Something they have no instruction manual for, no countermeasure against. You became inaccessible emotionally, unreachable mentally, invincible spiritually. They can't manipulate you anymore because you severed the connections. They can't deceive you anymore because you reprogrammed your awareness. They can't weaponize your history anymore because you converted it into protection. This is what paralyzes them with fear. You didn't just endure, you leveled up. You went from the basic model to something they don't possess the intelligence to understand yet. You're functioning on wavelengths they can't detect, moving at velocities they can't measure, thinking in realities they can't enter, and every attempt they make to trap you with their antiquated methods, their worn-out tricks, their expired manipulation playbook, they slam into concrete because you're not the same being they wounded, you're not the same spirit they violated, you're not the same consciousness they tried to dominate. You're the upgrade they never installed, the update they ignored, the revolution they dismissed. And now it's impossibly late to access the new version of understanding you, because you've already advanced 3 generations beyond. They wanted you frozen. They required you paralyzed. They prayed you'd remain in the same psychological cage they constructed around you. But you didn't just break out. You incinerated that prison and erected an empire in its ruins, an empire with zero entrance for people who weren't there during construction, an empire built on wisdom extracted from every betrayal, every letdown, every instant you were abandoned to survive alone. And now they stand outside, pleading, explaining, rationalizing. But the gates don't open for sightseers. The gates don't open for spectators. The gates only open for those who were present when there was no gate at all, when it was just you, the wreckage, and the impossible mission of creating something from absolute nothing. That's the forbidden element. You weren't supposed to extract lessons from the suffering. You were supposed to drown in it. You weren't supposed to transform through the treachery. You were supposed to turn bitter, but you took every toxin they force-fed you and alchemized it into healing. And that violates every law they believed controlled human existence. Let's discuss what's occurring beneath the visible surface. In the frequencies between the obvious, in the shift they sense but can't articulate. There's been a power transfer, a silent revolution of influence that required no announcement, no fanfare, no external confirmation. You became the protagonist in a narrative they assumed was theirs. You became the gravitational center in spaces full of people who previously ignored you. You became the benchmark they measure their own evolution against, and they despise it. They loathe the reality that your name surfaces in discussions you're not present for. They can't tolerate that your decisions are being dissected, your movements being decoded, your silence being analyzed like ancient text. You didn't request this authority. You didn't compete for this influence. But you earned it through something they'll never grasp, through suffering they refuse to witness, through expansion they never encouraged. You became formidable not through their blessing, but through your immunity to needing it. That's the revolution. You stopped requiring them to acknowledge you, and suddenly they couldn't stop watching. You stopped justifying yourself, and suddenly your silence became the most convincing testimony in existence. You stopped pretending, and suddenly your authenticity became irresistible. This is what they can't duplicate, can't forge, can't simulate, because authentic power doesn't advertise itself. True authority doesn't need validation. Real influence doesn't hunt attention. It simply is. Undeniable, inescapable, impossible to overlook. And now, every space you occupy, the energy transforms, not because you're forcing it, not because you're performing, but because you carry something most humans spend entire lifetimes pursuing and never locate. You carry evidence, evidence that you can be shattered and not remain shattered, evidence that you can be buried and still flourish. Evidence that you can be written off and still rewrite everything. They see it in your gaze. They feel it in your aura. They hear it in how you communicate now. Fewer words, but every syllable landing like a final judgment. You're not debating anymore. You're not justifying anymore. You're not explaining anymore. You're just being, and your being alone is reconstructing the entire game. They assumed they had you decoded, categorized, filed away, forgotten. But you became the anomaly that demolished their entire hypothesis. You became the exception that proved their science wrong. You became the living proof of what happens when someone refuses to accept the ceiling others construct for them. And now they're scrambling, recalculating, desperate to understand how someone with your obstacles, your situation, your setbacks could possibly occupy the position you hold now. The numbers don't work. The reasoning doesn't connect. The story doesn't make sense. And that's precisely where your power exists, in the void where their comprehension ends and your truth begins. You're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be complete. You're not supposed to be victorious, but you are. And that impossible reality is going to haunt them eternally. Remember when they observed you? When your suffering was their entertainment, your battles were their gossip, your collapse was content for their meaningless existence. Remember when they sat in judgment, dissecting your every choice, criticizing your decisions, forecasting your defeat like commentators analyzing a competition. Well, the roles reversed. The watchers became the watched. The judges became the judged. Now they're the ones being observed, being evaluated, being found insufficient. Because every time they scroll through your reality now, every time they witness your progress, every time they see confirmation that you're flourishing, they're forced to confront their own stagnation. Your evolution becomes their reflection. Your achievement becomes their ruler. Your serenity becomes their conviction. They can't avoid it. They can't deny it. They can't pretend you're not surpassing them in every dimension that truly counts. Not metrics, not validation, not superficial approval, but substance, transformation, truth, liberation. You're not faking contentment anymore. You're inhabiting it quietly, privately, in ways they'll never witness because they're too occupied performing for strangers who don't matter, and it's destroying them from within. They assumed observing your struggle would elevate them, but observing your success is making them feel irrelevant. Every step you take, every boundary you establish, every victory you claim is a wordless reminder of what they could have become if they weren't so invested in destroying others to feel significant. You became the standard they can't achieve, the level they can't reach, the version of winning they lack the bravery to pursue because your comeback isn't theatrical. It's not desperate. It's not begging for recognition. It's just authentic, relentless, irrefutable, and that terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could because they can protect themselves from anger. They can ignore fury. They can redirect conflict, but they can't protect themselves from your indifference. They can't ignore your growth. They can't redirect your success. So they watch obsessively, compulsively, pathetically, searching for weakness, for imperfection, some evidence that you're performing, that you're secretly struggling, that you're not genuinely okay, but you are. You're beyond okay. You're thriving in dimensions they'll never comprehend because they never had to rebuild from absolute destruction. They never had to discover strength in complete isolation. They never had to become their own rescue when existence refused to help. So yes, they're watching, but this time they're not watching to criticize. They're watching to study. They're watching to cope. They're watching because somewhere deep they recognize you discovered something they're still too arrogant to admit they desperately need. You discovered how to exist without their validation, their approval, their existence. And that autonomy, that self-reliance, that's the most dangerous thing you could have possibly cultivated because it means you don't require them anymore. And people who constructed their identity on being required by you, they're lost without that position. They're hollow without someone to control, diminish, or dominate. Your liberation exposed their void. Your peace revealed their turbulence. Your silence screamed the reality they invested years attempting to conceal. You won not through combat, but through refusing to remain defeated. Let's penetrate deeper into what makes this comeback forbidden, what shatters their understanding of how existence is supposed to function. You evolved in ways they didn't authorize, in ways they didn't observe, in ways that completely bypassed their permission. See, they wanted to orchestrate your story. They wanted to be present when you recovered so they could claim ownership, so they could declare they contributed, so they could feel significant in your journey. But you healed without them. You expanded without their direction. You transformed without their contribution, and that's the ultimate offense in their perception. How dare you become whole without them? How dare you discover peace they didn't grant? How dare you succeed using principles they didn't provide? You abandoned their script. You rejected their handbook. You stopped following the regulations of engagement they engineered to keep you small, controllable, predictable. They anticipated apologies. You delivered boundaries. They anticipated justifications. You delivered silence. They anticipated you to pursue closure. You delivered distance. Every action you executed was the inverse of what they programmed you to do, what they conditioned you to tolerate, what they manipulated you into accepting as normal. And by shattering that programming, you didn't just liberate yourself. You revealed the cage they constructed for you. You made visible the invisible restraints they wrapped around your capability. And now everyone can witness it. Everyone can see how they attempted to suppress you, how they undermined your confidence, how they turned your compassion into a weapon against you.